1 week season.
1 week season, fam. La Familia, welcome back. Wake and Snake, June 23rd. Summer is officially here. I hope you're all out enjoying it like I am, as you can see behind beautiful Las Vegas. Welcome back. It is after it's been like 3 weeks now, almost a month since Billy and I were together. I was out a week, then he was out a week. Now we are back, kind of get to touch base and check in on things. Of course, oneweekseason.com. You can check us out there. We have our Best Ball Basics package, also our Best Ball Plus Premium package with the premium Discord and the in-depth game theory training sessions. But if you're more just dipping your toes, the Best Ball Basics is also good. You get all our rankings, our written works, and kind of can at a more economical price tag, kind of dip your toes in. If you want to check it out there, and then maybe upgrade later, that's an option as well. So highly encourage you to check us out again, oneweekseason.com if you are new. Again, my name is Mike Johnson, mjohnson86. We play most of our, my focus is mostly on drafters, their cumulative scoring format. They have a $2 contest. Again, if you are newer to best ball, great way to dip your toes in. Or if you are, a diehard like myself, great way to get volume and whatnot, lock in and get practice essentially for these other contests. But with all of that said, I'm going to bring on my esteemed co-host, long time no see, Billy. Welcome back.
Mike, it's good to be an esteemed co-host yet again. Good to see you. I love that you've got your Christmas mug and your Vegas background, Yeah. Feel like you're really going all in here.
Yep. Daughter brought me the coffee this morning and she's in a Christmas mood. It's half Christmas, she says. So
is she out of school yet, Mike?
She is, yeah. So
it's Christmas.
Summer, mom's home, kids are home. Yep, we're right in it. This is when we know we're in the thick of drafting. Speaking of in the thick of drafting, looks like you're about up here. Looks like we. Oh no, I saw the orange. I saw the orange OWS flag. I thought that was you, but that's McBan. Looks like you are at the 11th spot. Nice. So we get some time once again. We
have some time to fill. I do recognize Cujo in the 1 hole and McMahon in the 4 hole. I don't know the other names. But yeah, actually this is my 39th here in the $20. So I feel like I'll be able to get 11 more or so in the next week. Probably do most of them as slows, but get to that 50th one, get to the double rewards.
Yeah. Yep, as Billy's discussing their $20 main event tournament, they have milestone bonuses where you get essentially a free entry once you get to certain levels of drafts. You get a free entry at 10. Once you get to 25 and once you get to 50, and their interface makes it nice and easy to keep track of. You can see next to Billy that 39 tells you it is his 39th draft. And then, of course, they've got their $2 contest that I referenced earlier. It is at just under 50,000 out of 56,000 right now. I anticipate Friday or Saturday that will fill. Could potentially be earlier. We saw last year kind of the same situation, and it really ramped up with everyone trying to get to 150 at the end. And I know that's why you're drafting in the $20 for today's, or part of why. Obviously, you're trying to get to 50 drafts in the $20 by June 30th. So that's part of why. And also, you've already maxed out your $2 ones. So
exactly. I feel like I got into slow draft hell last year when we saw it kind of getting to the point where it was going to close, and I still needed 50 more. So I just had like 50 slows going, and with a full-time job, that was just a nightmare.
I can imagine. Yeah, we were kind of just discussing this before we went on air. But yeah, last year, similar situation. And the thing is, like, when you do that, which maybe some subs will end up doing that this year as well, Uh, but last year, at least, it became almost like a panic. Like everyone wanted to get as much volume down as they could. But then you had, I'm going to enter the next 15 slow drafts, and you end up with 4 or 5 people who are, from our kind of pod listening to similar stuff. And you kind of lose some of that edge. And I do think there is edge. You brought it up as well. Uh, when you do these slow drafts at the end of these contest windows, um, they're going to start. Usually, they take 2 to 3 weeks, so you can get some information. There isn't always a ton of information, but you might something might happen. A guy might get hurt. Shout out, unfortunately, Tyrese Halliburton from the city I am from, that I live in, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Uh, Tore his Achilles last night. Was sad to see that. Uh, but yeah, you can see different injuries in training camp or guys just doing whatever. Also, after mini camp, they've got a month to themselves. Sometimes players make poor decisions. And that's kind of a nice little segue into a player that I think is about to go off the board, Tyreek Hill, um, which one of our subscribers, of course, we like to talk about specific players and situations on this, on Wake and Snake in general. It's kind of the idea is market stuff. Tyreek Hill going mid to late third round, basically every draft. I never really see him go early in the second or early in the third, and I never really see him fall to the fourth. So pretty consistently in that range. We've seen him, I think, like 4 or 5 consecutive years prior to last season. He was a top 5 wide receiver. So how are you handling Tyreek?
I feel like when he like if I was at the 11 hole, like where I am now, and he was there for me at 35 or 38, I'm taking him. I I generally am not taking him before ADP. I feel like what's his ADP now? Probably around 32 or so. I mean, I guess I can
Yeah.
click and see. Um, yeah,
Yeah, 30.
his ADP is right around 30. So yeah, I mean, I think kind of if I'm in the middle, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I'm in this zone, I'm happy to kind of take him around ADP. I'm certainly happy to grab him after he falls. He's not somebody that I'm reaching for,
Mhm.
but I definitely want to get exposure to him because he's one of the guys that typically goes in the third round. He might be the only guy, in my opinion, that goes in the third round that has wide receiver 1 overall upside.
Mhm.
Um, So I do want to make sure that I have at least kind of field average on him.
Mhm.
Again, what some of the stuff we talk about behind the paywall is it's really more about the lineups versus just, hey, I want to make sure I get X percentage of each guy. I know that's stuff we try to keep, the subscribers protected to our specific thoughts on that. But yeah, I think he's a guy that I don't want to have none of. What about yourself? How are you handling it?
Yeah, uh, and he's such like when I segued into it, it was just because it seems like every summer that like something will come up in the news, whether it's one thing or 3 things, and whether they're minor or major. Like
Hmm.
something's going, like there's a lot going on around this guy, and trouble seems to follow him. So like, um, that's one of the things where like we're still a ways off. That being said, I also think if he proves he's healthy and he stays out of trouble, you look at the guys going ahead of him: T. Higgins, Marvin Harrison, JSN, Devontae Adams, Rasheed Rice, Garrett Wilson, probably even Lad McConkey, AJ Brown. I would say through
I
there.
I would prefer if we knew that Tyreek Hill is healthy, ready for camp, staying out of trouble. Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
probably like him at the 18-19 range. I
right.
just think
So
this early, it's such a risk.
right.
And
Yeah.
for me, I know that I'm going to get volume in later on as we get into August and September. Like I
Mhm.
know I'm going to do more than half my drafts in the last couple of weeks. Like I'll happily wait and get my exposure to him there. Although, like, game theory would say the opposite. Game theory would say it probably makes sense to take the risk now.
Yeah.
Um,
I think kind of segueing into the discussion of the two contests going on drafters, I think it would make sense to kind of to not really force him or even avoid him, because in the $2 right now that's about to shut down, because you're not really going to gain that much, whereas uh, in the $20, which is only like 15% filled, um, right now you can get him end of the third round. Uh, you can get him with multiple top 2 round picks. If, as we're saying, if that plays out, he's healthy, looks locked in camp. All it takes is one. He catches a 70-yard touchdown first play of preseason or something, and all of a sudden, like he literally jumps around,
mhm.
just because people see it's the Tyreek we remember. Um, so, that's where, all of a sudden 70% of the field is, drafting him in the second round and you got him in the late third. So yeah, I think that kind of makes sense. I also think that just in general, the Dolphins, we've talked about this a little bit and I wrote about it. There's value somewhere on the Dolphins,
Mhm.
whether it's with him, because you talk about that risk with him. Um, But if that risk comes to fruition, that means that somebody else, Jonnu Smith, who was the tight end, won the last 8 weeks of last season, will continue to be like a really undervalued tight end. Or Jalen Waddle, who's entering his age 26 season, really high value prospect. He's got the physical ability. This could be the year we see him spike into like a top 12 receiver. So one way or another, stacking and putting teammates together is always popular and something in best ball people are always looking to do. I think kind of ham and egging your rosters with one of them on each makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I like that. Um, I think another guy that's, probably going off the board soon, although I've seen him start to slip, um, kind of a little bit more uncertainty around his situation is Jordan Addison. Um, you know, he's one of those rare situations. I think he's got a trial date set for like July 13th or July 15th,
Hmm.
where you may gain some information in these snapshot $2 contests by really, getting into some of those slow drafts on the very last day. You know, the problem is, I think even with if that were to, you were to get that to play out, like he's going to be drafted by the time you get that news. You know what I mean? Like he's typically a sixth or seventh round pick. Even if you're going on July 4th, even if it stretches out to July 4th, which I don't think so. I think the contest will fill by like the 30th. Um, he'll already be gone. So that news won't really be super consequential, with the exception of, the secondary and the tertiary pieces, who would go really late. Wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 for Minnesota potentially becomes super viable. Rookie Ty Felton maybe jumps up and becomes, a 13th, 14th round pick if he's going to be wide receiver 2 on the team potentially.
Yeah. I think the Addison situation, well, couple things. The trial date's set to start, I believe, July 15th. Um, to your point, a lot of times that trial date's set uh, kind of almost within range of when slow drafts would kind of leak out to, but also I think um, it feels like these cases, like, they don't end up actually going to trial. Like, the judge set, like, an actual trial date, like, it's not getting pushed any more than it already has, but they could settle prior to that.
Mhm.
And he's going to plead to something. Like, it's not really a did he do it or didn't he do it situation. It's a matter of what are the charges, what is the consequences. I don't wanna talk about like the whole situation, but it was some driving stuff. Kind of my take on it, and some people that I've seen post some things on Twitter, like some legal people. I would guess he's going to get like a 2 to 3 game suspension. I don't think it's going to be more than that because he didn't hurt anyone. He didn't, it obviously wasn't safe what he was doing, but um, I think from that standpoint, you look at him last season, and actually about to drop is the wide receiver episode on our premium podcast, premium training sessions for subscribers, for Best Ball Plus subscribers. But he was the wide receiver 20 last season, and he missed 2 games. He missed weeks, I believe it was an injury, an ankle. He missed weeks 2 and 3. So, he had 3 games. He had a 23-point week, a 30-point week, and a 39-point week. Several others in the teens. I actually think he's like pretty severely undervalued. He was wide receiver 20 overall, despite 2 missed weeks. So I think I've been targeting him a lot throughout the 6th round already.
Mhm.
I don't know that I'm going to bump my ranking on him just because I don't know that I like need to. I'm guessing that like the fear and worry around him will bump him down a little bit. And I kind of think, it's when there's blood in the streets, buy oil, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's kind of how I'm approaching him. I don't think it is a death sentence by any means to his value. If you're in playoff style contests, any suspension would almost certainly be at the start of the year, which doesn't really matter that much. And we've literally seen it. This Minnesota offense is one that I'm liking to buy. You've got Justin Jefferson, obviously a top 4 pick pretty much every draft. I've not 4 is the furthest I've seen him drop on drafters at least. Uh,
Mhm.
but then, yeah, you've got Addison, Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason, all kind of go in that round 6 to 9 range.
Mhm.
Uh, and I think it's going to be a productive offense. I think JJ McCarthy is pretty exciting.
Yeah, agree. And he's someone that we have seen ADP severely rise over the whatever it's been. We're 2 months into best ball season. We haven't had really any news, no real injuries, and we've seen him go from an ADP in the 140s to his ADP is probably down to like 120, 119 now because he's typically going right here in this like 10-11 turn with the
Mm-hmm.
guy who has Jefferson. Because he's not typically making it back to 143, 146. So if you have Jefferson, like I would guess that McMahon probably will target him 117 to 124 if he's trying to stack him with Jefferson.
Mm-hmm. Do
Um,
you
Go ahead.
Sorry, just moving on to another thing. So Justin Fields just went off the board on pick 100. McMahon, if you want to click on his lineup, I just want to look at something with Fields. Um, so yeah, ADP 92.9. That's end of the 8th round. I've seen him slipping a little bit in some drafts lately. Um, he's not
Yeah.
someone I have much of. How have you been approaching him? Obviously, we've seen his rushing upside. We saw that stretch with the Bears 2 or 3 years ago where, he had like a couple 40-point games. So obviously the upside is there. I think 1 or 2 of those games were against the Lions, who are, their defensive coordinator at the time is now Fields' head coach. So I guess do you have any thoughts on Fields or how you're approaching him? Do you have much of him or?
I am definitely under the field on Fields. No pun intended there. I feel like the only builds I have him on are Garrett Wilson builds, where he kind of like I haven't been taking him like if I'm in McMahon's position, I haven't been taking him at 93 unless there's no one in the next like 10 that like I'm just not enamored like that I just don't feel like I want to have. I'm usually willing to push Justin Fields, and if I don't get him, typically for me, he's typically paired with Chase or Jefferson or Lamb. One of these higher wide receivers. Like I never feel like I've missed out on a really strong stack by not getting it with Fields.
Right.
To me, Fields as a UGA fan, being in Atlanta, like I got to see Justin Fields, and obviously he played some at Ohio State as well. I'm not enamored. Like to me, I feel like in the same range, like I'd much rather take the shot on Bo Nix. I'd much rather take the shot on Kyler Murray, who are typically going right in this same range.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that it's kind of similar to how my thoughts on him are. There isn't really a spot like his playing style does not necessitate a stack, right? And he could have a
Correct.
nice season uh, and doesn't carry Garrett Wilson, and vice versa. Wilson could have an all right season. Who knows what Fields is just he's very volatile. He averaged like 13 points a game last year, I believe, in Pittsburgh. So it wasn't anything special. Obviously, his the rushing gives him a little bit higher floor, but how excited are we about this Jets offense? And you look at the quarterback range around him. I Mahomes went at 75 here, but I often get him in the eighth. I often we'll see him go into the eighth, like late 80s into the 90s. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and if that's where Fields ADP is, I'd rather bet on Mahomes. Even Mayfield has been top 10 quarterback the last 2 years. Nix, Kyler, Purdy, Dak, all these guys, even Caleb Williams and Drake May, second year quarterbacks. Um, there's just a lot of other options there. So it's not necessarily that I hate Justin Fields. I'll probably be on him several DFS weeks this year, but it's just not a spot that I feel like. Usually somebody else likes him before I like him, I guess is the easiest way to say it.
Yeah, I think you and I are aligned in that thinking.
Yeah. Um, so you just took Ray Davis. This Bills looks like James Cook is
He continues to slip.
he's sitting in. He's showing up he showed up to their training camp or their mini camp stuff, and he's trying to get a new contract. But he showed up, but then people are like, well, somebody asked him, like a reporter, like, well, why'd you show up? Aren't you still looking for a new contract? And he just said, I like money. Because he doesn't want to get fined. The old Marshawn Lynch, I'm just here so I don't get fined. Uh,
Exactly.
so I don't think that's going away, but at some point I do expect he will get signed. I don't know what that looks like, but I think Ray Davis is a guy we could see. Like if Cook signs, immediately he's going to bump back up to like the early fourth round, um, instead of falling off into the mid to late fourth. He could be a 3-4 turn type guy. And Davis probably drops at that point, I would think. Probably drops a round or so. And I'm pretty high on Davis regardless of the situation.
Same.
Um, but also, like, I've heard it floated like a possibility, like Cook getting traded because they don't want to pay him. What does a guy like Ray Davis look like in that situation? He's probably
He's a fifth or sixth round pick,
I was
maybe
going to say,
earlier.
he's got probably right in that, like, in this
I mean,
draft, fifth
I take
round.
that back. I'm taking him before I'm taking Hampton, who kind of has a little bit more. Like I like Hampton, but he's kind of got a little bit of that unknown. Like just literally picking a name here, he's
Mhm,
got a little bit of that unknown. Like we know that he's got strong upside from what we've seen in college, but then like he's also got Najee Harris there, who's rushed for 1,000 yards every season of his career. Like,
mhm.
and as much as people wanted Najee Harris to be dead in Pittsburgh last year because DFS and best ball people just like Jalen Warren, like the coaching staff hasn't found Najee Harris to be dead yet. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably taking him up here in this fifth round range.
So two guys that McMahon, I'm not just favoring him because he's a subscriber, but the two guys that he just took, I find pretty interesting. Uh, Colston Loveland, first of all, continues to drop. At the start of this draft cycle, he was like an early 10th round pick. He'd go around like pick 110. Sometimes
Mhm.
he'd sneak into the ninth. Um, and he's got that Q next to his name because he's not participating in stuff. Uh, but like nothing has changed in terms of like he had shoulder surgery in like January or February. Like this, they drafted him um, knowing that he was going to have to rehab. He's going to get strength back. I think he's been running some routes, but nothing like no contact or anything. Now he's the 10th overall pick in the NFL draft. He's now being drafted. McMahon got him here at pick 141. I actually got him at pick 146 or 47 um, at one of my $2 drafts in the last couple weeks. What I mean, do you have much of Loveland? Are you a fan? Do you have any thoughts? Do you know much about him as a prospect, or is it more just like I don't, I haven't seen him play that much other than highlights, and to me, it's just like a process thing.
Uh, I mean, he typically and this draft a little atypical. He typically goes right around the same range, slightly after, but half around as Warren, as Tyler Warren, and I much prefer Tyler Warren.
I think
I,
they're both. If you want to click on those guys who drafted them, I think they're both around 130 ADP. Warren's
Yeah,
right at
Warren right now is
140.
ADP of 130. Loveland ADP of 143. So one round difference, basically.
Yeah. So
Um,
yeah,
I think for me, the only Loveland exposure I have is on Caleb Williams rosters. Like he's not a guy that I'm loving at ADP. Like I'd much rather take Warren around earlier, or in the same vein, like I'd much rather take Tucker Kraft, who again has a 135, like is going in generally the same round, 5-10 picks early, not even 10 picks earlier. Like I just rather go with what I've seen before. And it's
Mhm,
not like Chicago is this high powered offense. Like we are
mhm.
expecting them to take a step forward with Caleb, this year in his second year. But like again, like there are players I'd rather take. What
See,
about for you? Is it similar?
I actually really like Loveland, especially as he continues to drop in this like late 12th into the 13th round range. Like he just is a guy that, like, if the shoulder's healthy, if he's back, just such a talent profile, and like Ben Johnson leading the offense there. We've seen what he's done with Detroit. I think that so Luther Burden also had like a hamstring injury kind of pop up. Um, those guys, he was a 38th overall pick. Like new regime came in, put in, these were the first two picks they made. These are the first two guys they added to the roster after not really doing anything in free agency. Um, I think there's a plan there. Uh, And, now they're going in the 11th, 12th, 13th rounds. I guess kind of my thought and philosophy on it is it's hard for me to see kind of what we talked about with the Miami situation before. If you look at Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, and Cole Kmet, if you look at the three of them, because Kmet, the incumbent tight end, it's hard for me to see one of them not being a smash at ADP.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Loveland does fall off, Komet is just basically stealing in the 20th round. We've seen what the Detroit tight end position has produced. Sam Laporta the last couple of years. Even they kind of didn't really have much at the position prior, but some no names would put up some decent weeks. Komet has he's produced before. So if Loveland, if he doesn't play or he's super limited or he doesn't know the playbook well enough. So, that means Komet's on the field a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of similar, I think DJ Moore and Rome Odunze are clearly the top options for the Bears, like, or they project to be. One of, Komet, Loveland, and Burden who's going to be that like third option besides the backfield and more in a Dunze?
Oh man, to me the decision here is: do I grab Mason Taylor here or do I push tight end? I I don't feel like my running back room is that strong. I'm gonna grab a seventh running back, which I know you would never do, but I'm going to do
I
it, and
do
we'll look at it at the end of the team. You might. I don't want to say you never would. Yeah, I mean, I started with 5 wide receivers through the first 7 rounds, 6 through 9. Okay, it's not horrible. I don't mind taking some later ones here. So this will probably end up being a 2-7-8-3 build, probably. Just based on I probably need. I don't know that I feel comfortable just 2 tight ends with just Hawkinson, just because my second tight end is not going to be a big name tight end. So this probably has to be a third tight end. So yeah, probably 2-7-8-3. Probably where I'm targeting this to be. Do
Okay.
you look at that stuff ahead of time? Is that something that you like to do while you're?
What's
It's
that?
much easier to do in a slow draft. It's tougher with 30 seconds and trying to watch what all the other teams are doing.
Look at what?
What your likeliest construction is going to be as you enter the final kind of couple of rounds.
Um, yeah, that's probably something that would probably be a good topic for me to dive into in one of the premium sessions. But in general, yeah, I based on how I draft early in the draft, I kind of have an idea what kind of my silos are looking like, um,
Mm-hmm.
and what where I'm gonna want to distribute more capital late in the draft, and so kind of take the early. Uh, I guess I'd say it this way: I take how did the draft fall? What were the decisions I made early? And kind of once I get to like that seventh, eighth round range, because that's where like you got to start making some decisions. How do you want to approach the quarterback position, the tight end position? Um, do I want to take wide receiver 6 super early? Do I want to get a third running back here?
Sure.
So I guess I kind of look at where I'm at early in the draft, project that to where I want to take more shots, I guess, in the later rounds. Like, where do I want to um, load up just on like dart throws? Is this going to be a draft where I want more dart throws at a certain position? So I'm going to go heavier there. And if so, then maybe I want to spend that eighth round pick on this other position because I don't want to, you know, I want to take TJ Hawkinson here in this draft in the eighth round. Um, so I'm spending a little more at tight end so that I don't have to um, draft too super late. Maybe I'm going to take an eighth and a 10th round tight end,
Mm-hmm.
kind of back to back. Or am I going to take Hawkinson here and then I'm going to wait on tight end and I am going to take 2 or 3 in the last 3 or 4 rounds? So if that kind of makes sense, I take the early, where am I at? What do I want to do with the late ones? And I'm usually trying out different approaches too. Kind of thinking through things. Sometimes I will like say, all right, this draft, I'm going to wait at this position and I'm going to load up and take these shots late.
Mm-hmm.
Um, kind of make those decisions and then play it out, see it through. I think that it's kind of a trap sometimes where you just go through and the draft goes, and as the ADP or your rankings, guys go off, and you're just kind of okay, who's the top guy here? Um, a lot of the ADP is just guessing, and it's just kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, like a circular motion. Like guys are drafted a certain spot because of their ADP, and then because they're drafted there, their ADP stays in a certain spot. So I think there's a lot of guys that you see once you get in these double-digit rounds where, um, maybe the ADP doesn't necessarily make sense.
Yeah, I always, and one of the things we talk about, I don't want to spend too much time on. We'll call it a theory that you specifically have on quarterbacks. I feel like this would be, without getting too much into it, this would be a rather high grouping of quarterbacks, we'll say. But to me, these I don't feel like I need a third. Like I'm comfortable with these two guys as it for me. And I think I feel like I've got to kind of build that way to kind of say, hey, if I'm gonna bank on Stroud and Penix both having strong seasons, like I don't mind grabbing a couple different pieces. I'm never taking Kyle Pitts. Like it's just not happening. I don't
I was
care when
just
he
going to ask
falls to
about
like
him.
the
You took McLeod.
17th round.
So you've got Drake London. Obviously, Bijan's a top 5 pick basically every draft, and then Drake London is, he's gone by the middle of the second round at the latest. And then Mooney is like an 8th rounder.
Yeah, so
After that, it's like now Pitts is falling into the 15th round. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, he went a round later than normal. He's usually in the 14th.
Yeah,
But just kind of being aware of that.
Like, yeah.
I was going to say, just being aware of that, like that board presence. And I know it's something that I like to talk about a lot. Like, because the Bijan drafter already had Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, and the Darnell Mooney guy was to my right. Like, I really felt like here I could push Penix to 155, even though that's probably a round past his ADP.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 140. Yeah, 12, exactly 12 spots past, exactly around. Just kind of thinking, like, and that's to me, that's something that you've got to be paying attention to, even in these fast drafts. It's easier to do in a slow draft, but kind of saying, okay, who are the likeliest people to take this stack? Well, for Atlanta, it's either the guy who has Bijan or it's the guy who has Darnell Mooney, if you have Drake London. And when you look and see, okay, one of those guys I don't have to worry about because I'm going to pick before he does again, and the other guy already has 2 quarterbacks, both that he took in the first 7 rounds, I feel like that's a situation where I could push.
Yeah,
and unrelated, but we were talking Atlanta, so I want to just kind of call it.
And every draft room kind of seems different, and I think like, Bryce Young went early here. Tua, I've seen Tua. I've gotten Tua in like the 170s. Like I've gotten him in the 15th round, and I've also seen him go like he did here in the 12th round. So like he's a guy who gets drafted like at a pretty wide range, and it's one of those like all it takes is one. All it takes is one person to really like a guy. Whereas for somebody to fall, it takes everybody to not like him kind of deals.
Yep.
I think Penix kind of the same way. Like I've seen the Bijan draft him at 141, 142. I've seen, him fall to, the 160s. So, kind of all over the board there. I'm curious what you do here.
I'm looking for some help on my thought, and I have to try to think it all through here. This is definitely a wide receiver for me. I'm going to do this, and then tight end.
The Denver wide receiver room was always a pain, during the season for our DFS Inner Circle product. An Inner Circle, I write an afternoon only article, so it's and you obviously do our late swap article, but my afternoon only article focuses on those just 4 p.m. Eastern set of games, generally between 3 and 6 games in that window, depending on the week and whatever else is going on. But I've won twice in the last 3 or 4 years. I've had the highest score on that slate, won their big contest. So it's kind of an edge I've found. So I write the article for our subscribers there. Shout out 1 week season. But the Broncos, they like always play in that window. Like all their home games, they didn't have a lot of primetime games like Sunday, Monday, Thursday night last year. So it seemed like I was writing about them every week in the NFL Edge and then in the afternoon only because I have those games. And that Broncos wide receiver situation was just such a pain to figure out. But Vele kind of emerged and was pretty consistent guy. You look at Marvin Mims came on late in the year, but even him, he hasn't been like a high volume guy.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at where Mims is going, he's actually falling a little bit too, more in like the 11th, 12th round now.
Yep.
But
He's got Mims has got an ADP of 129. So yeah, he's typically going in the 11th round.
Yeah, and you look at then Vele, who wasn't that far behind him. He didn't have as many spike weeks, but paying attention to roster construction, um, his specific kind of role as that, like he was kind of like a big slot, kind of a target guy. Maybe he gets bumped off by Evan Ingram, but also maybe it doesn't. Ingram's had some injuries,
Mm-hmm.
and I think he had 6 double-digit weeks in like 11 games last year. Did Vele? So, uh, I think he kind of fits this roster uh, somewhat well. It's just another, you pairing him with Sutton too. Um, guys like Olave, who knows what New Orleans offense looks like week to week. Jaden Reed has been kind of a volatile performer with a high weekly ceiling, but we've seen him disappear. Bateman, kind of the same. Baltimore could go super run heavy, or they spread things out a little bit. So getting, I think, McLeod and Vele as like more steady contributors that might be able to kind of give you usable weeks here and there.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a roster that has some value on.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't know that it's particularly strong at any position, to be candid. It just kind of feels like it's safe across the board. Maybe safe's not even the right word. I don't know that any position is safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always find that it's tougher to do the fast drafts than the slow. I feel like, when it comes to my turn in the slow, and as you can see, I've got a bunch of slows going. I don't know. I feel like I take a little bit of time. Like I'm not one who's, oh, it's my turn. 20 seconds later, click. Like I feel like I'm looking at the board and feeling what is likely to come back to me and what really do I need to address. I feel like that's a lot harder to do in a fast. Certainly when I'm having the conversation with you, talking news and just making conversation and not paying as much attention to the board.
Yeah, for sure. I have not seen Aronde Gadsden drafted in any of my drafts.
You haven't been in the draft with me. I haven't taken him a ton of times.
Yeah.
Definitely still single digits, but I've taken him 4 or 5 times in $2 before. This is my first $20 exposure to him. But I didn't feel like there was any. I felt like any tight end that I'm taking at that point in the 20th round is a complete dart throw. Like the guys that I generally lean into later went a lot earlier. Like I have been taking a lot of shots on Arroyo in the 20th round. Arroyo went in the 17th round in this draft. I know that there's some guys that we talked about, and you've talked about in your training session. So I don't want to get too deep into the weeds in that, but
Well,
a lot of those guys had kind of gone.
yeah, and it kind of just goes into the whole idea of what I was referring to earlier, that like a lot of these ADPs and stuff, like it's just an order. Like you're making a list, there's going to be like a linear order, but like really, what is the difference between Gadsden and some of these other guys going in the 17th to 20th rounds, where you're kind of projecting and hoping for a role? Training camps start, they're going to give different guys opportunities. That Chargers offense, like Tyler Conklin, Will Dissly, like those aren't like immovable objects in his way on the depth chart. uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that there's for sure, that's the type of spot where, yeah, I think, and he kind of fits that room uh, that you've got there pretty well. You're obviously betting on a big year from Hawkinson, and then Sanders and Gadsden, just guys who could give you a couple decent weeks. Really is what you're hoping for at that tight end position. Do you want to read through your roster for the listeners?
Sure. And then Yeah, that's fine. So at quarterback, I go C.J. Stroud, Michael Penix. Running back, Kyron Williams, Henderson, Tracy, Ray Davis, Algier, Nick Chubb, and Jalen Wright. So tried to get correlation there with both likely backup running backs with Tyler Algier and Nick Chubb, with Stroud and Penix. And then a wide receiver, Nico Collins, Drake London, Sutton, Olave, Reed, Rashad Bateman, Ray McLeod, and Devon Vele. So again, tried to make sure that I had a pass catcher with Collins and Drake London for both Stroud and Penix, and ended up grabbing Ray McLeod there, just because I didn't get either tight end to pair with them. Not that that's an essential piece, but certainly had the option of both. I think yeah, I was going to say Schultz went just a few picks before me. Kind of at a spot where I wouldn't have expected from this drafter, just as like an FYI. Like, he'd already taken Brock Bowers and Sam Laporta. Obviously the same bye week, so he does, like, that's a big mistake, or in my opinion, mistake if you're going to use that much draft capital on those two tight ends. Like, you really don't want to be taking a third. But not what I would have expected there. So, yeah, I think we're good there. I'll talk through the other two lineups from OWS subs. This is something that Maximus and I did that I think the subs kind of really enjoyed. So McMahon goes Fields, JJ McCarthy, Kenneth Walker, Caleb Johnson, Bashul Tootin, Isaiah Garendo, Braylon Allen, and Marshawn Lloyd at running back. Braylon Allen, probably my highest drafted running back, like on the board, like where he goes. You frequently see him fall into the 170s. I just feel like when you're getting him in the 15th round, like, to me, he's got such immense upside. If something were to happen to Breece Hall, and even if something doesn't happen, like we saw what Detroit was able to do with kind of a split backfield. You've got the same offensive coordinator. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's a spot I really like. Any thoughts before I move on to that?
No, they have a different offensive coordinator, but I think Aaron Glenn, their head coach, who was the Lions defensive coordinator, he has some. He'll definitely influence it, and obviously they signed Justin Fields and they didn't bring in, like, it's Fields, right?
Yeah. And bring in a veteran.
He was the passing game coordinator for the Lions, so like he did come from the Lions, so it wasn't Ben Johnson. But I would think, given how successful Detroit was, the approach will be pretty similar. Why, if it's not broke, why fix it? And to your point, I think that I talked about Isaiah Davis, I believe, last week, because Aaron Glenn has referred to the backfield as like three really good players, Hall, Allen, and Davis. But I think Davis resembles Breece Hall a lot more, as with like his shiftiness and pass catching ability. And I think Braylon Allen is kind of that hammer regardless. So yeah, I think he for sure is a guy who, it wouldn't shock me to see him score 7-8 touchdowns, even if Breece plays the whole season. And getting that in the 14th, 15th round, that's going to give you a handful of usable weeks, which has a lot of value there. And obviously there's upside from there as well, because we saw him, when Breece was out, have a couple really nice games in 2024.
Yeah, I think it's early, so I was just like, and again, this is something that I literally have done one of these Waken Snakes. So if you don't like it, we don't have to do it anymore. But I feel like I like to give a little bit of feedback. Not that you gave me any feedback on my roster, Mike, but it's fine. You can. To me, like, I don't personally, like, I don't love this running back room, just because I feel like outside of Kenneth Walker, like, you've got a lot of uncertainty on your next 5 guys for early in the season. And the difference with drafters versus, DK an underdog is that every week counts the same. So, it's not like the play like this to me, this is a totally viable like playoff build. And this could, we could get injury in training camp where, Caleb Johnson is the hands down starter, or same thing with Tootin. Like they just, but I think right now there's a lot of uncertainty for me at running back. Wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, JSN, DK Metcalf. Like this is stacked. Adunze, Cup, Dontavian Wicks, Ty Felton, and Corley. Okay, so you've got like a lot of good correlation here with, multiple between Jefferson and Felton and Wilson and Corley to go along with the two quarterbacks. So personally, like I really like that personally. This wide receiver room is stacked. And then tight end, Loveland, Freiermuth, Arroyo. All guys that I'm a little lower than you on Loveland. The only thing that I don't love, and it's just personally, like I don't know that it actually matters that much. I generally try to vary my weeks on tight ends, like just because it's so early in the season and you've got your two highest picks, like with Arroyo being a rookie, like this could very well be a 0 week 5 at tight end. What do you think on the roster overall? Like again,
I like what you said. We talk about this a lot, like kind of the story your roster tells. Like, what is the situation that plays out where this becomes a roster that's in contention? And obviously, this roster, you're going to need great seasons from Justin Jefferson and Garrett Wilson. If you get a great season from Justin Jefferson, a lot of ways that can happen, but also, Ty Felton, he kind of ties in there with like, let's say Justin Jefferson has a Jamar Chase like season, like what Chase did last year, where he kind of blows the top off the wide receiver position. How does that happen? Well, it's probably some of the like main threats or other like top options, Addison, Hawkinson, face some sort of, whether it's injury, the suspension for Addison, whatever happens, maybe those guys aren't on the field. So I think there's like tying in that last couple rounds pick with Felton makes a lot of sense, because how does that play out in terms of, if Jefferson has that season, there's a good chance for him to have that dominant of a season. It's probably not just like the Vikings are really good and everybody's on the field, right? It's probably like he's super alpha because he has to be, and they're just force feeding him the ball. But also that's happening in a situation where somebody, whether it's Ty Felton, Jalen Naylor, is on the field more. So I think that that's a nice approach there. Also think that, Malachi Corley, it's a bet on the Jets offense, and you've got Wilson, obviously a second round pick here. But then you've got Fields, who has, we're not targeting him, but he does have that rushing ability, that upside. And then you've got Braylon Allen and Corley. So kind of just an across the board bet on a relatively cheap offense. And I think those things make a ton of sense. And then he's got the heavy Seattle stack with Walker, JSN, Cooper Kupp, and Arroyo. And that's an approach I really like, honestly, with just stacking up without the quarterback, and kind of making a blind bet on an offense and recognizing the, QB silo, how it's kind of just a different animal on drafters. So yeah, I like a lot of the concepts that McMahon took there.
Agreed. Yeah. To me, I think it's unfair to talk player takes. Like, personally, I don't love Justin Fields, but that doesn't mean he's not a viable quarterback. And you took him, after ADP, and the construction makes sense. Like, to me, that's how I like to look at it when I go back and analyze my drafts after the fact. Like, does the story make sense? Like, is the construction sound? Like, to me, like, I try not to get into like my player takes, because half of them are going to be right and half of them are going to be wrong. So,
Sammy Telesco, thanks for the class, boys. I have a few minutes Let's go Buffalo and the Raiders only because of Tommy. All
Yeah.
right. I don't get the reference, but
I don't either. All right, I'm going. I know that Cujo is also a subscriber. Let's do the same thing if you're cool with that, and then we can wrap it up. I know we try to keep it to an hour.
yeah.
So Cujo goes Bo Nix, Sam Darnold, Chase Brown, DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, Zach Charbonnet, Jaden Blue, Sampson, and Blake Corum. Let's just do the whole roster. Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, Devontae Smith, Travis Hunter, Marvin Mims, Quentin Johnson, Michael Wilson, Elijah Moore. And then at tight end, he goes Evan Ingram, Brenton Strange, Jawan Johnson. All right, so he's got good correlation here. He doesn't get Sutton because I reached on him. I was considering that as like a potential stack just because you don't typically see Sutton go that side of the board. So I wanted to kind of pull somebody forward who typically is at this 4 or 5 turn just to get a little bit different with my build potentially. But even with that, he's still able to grab Marvin Mims. He's still able to grab Evan Ingram. So I do like that correlation. Then Sam Darnold didn't really have any other Seattle pieces because McMahon took them all outside of Zach Charbonnet. So overall construction standpoint, to me, the quarterback situation is probably a little bit weak. Like this is probably a roster. I personally probably am taking a third quarterback. But again, I'd be curious to hear your opinion on that. You're real on a build like this. You're really building around Bo Nix having a top 5 QB season, which I think is in the range of outcomes. But I think if I'm doing that, I think the most likely scenario, if Bo Nix is having a monster season, I think it's likely that Courtland Sutton is as well. So I think that to me, like if I'm building around that, pairing, like that's where I personally think. But I don't know that it's
can you click off his roster and just see the draft board quick?
Sure.
I just want to see something. Interesting. Yeah. So, my thought there would be, I guess it would have been a matter of when does he take that other quarterback? See, Richardson went off at 212. I think if Richardson had got back to him at 216, 17, I think that would have been a perfect spot to take him instead of one of those running backs. I think Daniel Jones would have been a fine pick there too. He didn't go till 226. That probably would have been what I would have done is taken Jones instead of one of those running backs. I actually like Sampson and Corum.
I do
a
too.
decent bit as they're consistently going in the last 3 or 4 rounds. But that aside, for this particular roster, I probably would have added Jones there at that turn. Indy's offense should be pretty solid, and Richardson obviously is falling a ton. Just that uncertainty is leaving both of the guys kind of at the bottom of drafts, and someone there in Indianapolis is going to end up a value quarterback when we look back at this. So that probably would have been the only thing I really would have changed. Otherwise, I think it's pretty well done.
Yep, I agree. I think every position is average or above average outside of QB, and I think QB could get there. You're banking on a huge season from Bo Nix. But sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the roster overall is good.
Good deal. Well, that is going to do it, I think. We're right at an hour, so good luck to Billy. Hopefully, if it's not hopefully, maybe this is the $500,000 roster. We'll see. But a lot of time to go. We're officially in summer this season or this week. It is like 95 in Wisconsin, which tells you, we're not joking around anymore. So all that said, you got a couple days to hop in the $2 on drafters before that one fills up. They'll for sure have another $2 that opens up If you're new to Drafters, use code OWS for a 100% deposit match up to $100. So yeah, you could get 100 entries in the $2. You could get 10 entries in the $20 or anywhere in between. Come check us out, oneweekseason.com. I am Mike, M Johnson 86. He is Billy, StatATL. Thank you for joining us. We will be back again, same time, same place next week. Goodbye.
1 week season. 1 week season.